Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Finance and Accounting Show. And today we are having another great conversation because one of the things that I run into as I talk to a lot of bookkeepers, accountants, and tax professionals is the reality is a lot of them don't really understand how do you really build a successful business in those fields. And the truth of the matter is, we may have been trained to do the technical work, but we weren't necessarily trained to actually build a successful business in those avenues. So you're going to be in for a treat with today's guest. So stay tuned because we're going to be talking about some of the secret success tips that he's learned in his career and how he's helping others. So stay tuned for today's episode. So without further ado, let me bring on my guest, Roger Knecht. Welcome to the show, Roger.
Great to be here. Thanks, Terrell.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, one of the things I will say is for those of you that are watching the show, one of the things that you may notice is the background here is completely different. And one of the things that I will say is also that right now we are actually filming while we're on the road. We're pre-recording this episode. Spend some time in Europe or back in the US, still on the road, but I definitely wanted to let you know that the great interviewing and the conversations that we have to really help accounting firm owners and accounting professionals, they just don't stop. So today I'm excited to talk with Roger. Now, Roger, before we jump into the details of the awesome work that you're doing, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
You bet. So my career started in the accounting space, actually as a direct hire and temporary placement assistant. I was a headhunter. So basically, I was taking accounting professionals and placing them into various roles, management and so forth. And it was through that I became familiar with an organization called Universal Accounting Center. And it was from that organization that I ended up finding very qualified individuals that I could place on assignment as well as give permanent positions. And it was then that I started my career with Universal Accounting Center, with which I've been here now over 22 plus years, helping accounting professionals primarily start and build their accounting businesses. And it's been a wonderful journey.
Awesome. Now, one of the things that I'm curious about is, you know, before you took this job, or the first job with them, just like was accounting a field that you had intentions of going into, or was it just kind of the luck of the opportunity?
It was not my intended profession. So basically, what happened is through various job choices, found myself migrating this direction. And it's been a pleasant journey. I've quite enjoyed the experience, but the intention definitely wasn't to do accounting.
Gotcha, gotcha. Now, I guess as you kind of moved into this, were you surprised by anything initially as you were trying to help qualified people find great jobs?
Actually, there's quite a few things. One is the accounting professional, as you said in your introduction, quite often we're very skilled in the technical side of things, the numbers. We're very comfortable with that. But there's a lot of soft skills that become very important within the career. Understanding that really this is still a people business. You have to understand how to communicate with non-accountants, what the numbers actually mean. And so there's a lot of things that really they complement and actually will accentuate someone's success if you develop those other skill sets. And so when I'm working with individuals, one of the things that we do focus on and emphasize are some of the things that you wouldn't expect, and it's outside of the accounting sphere, if you will.
Now, I guess when you're starting to work with someone on that, I mean, for you, because you've seen both having conversation with the accountant plus having conversations with the company that actually hired them, you've seen both sides. But do you find that accountants usually have some apprehension to developing the soft skills?
I wouldn't say apprehension, but I think some people are drawn to the numbers and they enjoy the fact that there's some absolute principles and numbers that they can kind of lean on, and they don't have to worry about a lot of the personal type things. But at the end of the day, I personally feel that your ability as an accountant is determined by how well you communicate that accounting information to a non-accounting professional, whether it's the business owner, management within the company. There's basically this disconnect where accounting's the language of business. And if you're unable to actually take and articulate what the numbers are saying and help the business owner, let's say, use that to make informed business decisions, I don't think you're fully reaching your potential as an accounting professional because yes, the numbers may be accurate, but unless they're useful, who cares?
You know what? That's a very good point because I will say, as a person, my background is I studied, business administration. I kind of emphasized in accounting in undergrad. I went to graduate school to get a master's degree in accounting. And one of the things that I remember in going through those is it talked about the users of the information. But what seems to be so interesting is that when you start working in accounting, it's almost like you focus so much on the technical stuff that you almost forget that there's a user for this information.
Yeah, the numbers are for someone. It's not something, it's not just to record and have, it's for someone. And unless the numbers are being utilized, unless someone is understanding what is being communicated, I think the information is lacking as to its usefulness. And so as an accounting profession, I will say this quite often. I think one of the failings we have within the profession is making the numbers useful for that business owner, let's say, because at the end of the day, we've all used and heard the phrase accounting's a language of business, but do we really see ourselves as translators, interpreters of that information? Too often, I think we're just assuming because they're making more money, they're making the decisions, whatever the excuse we want to use, we're assuming they understand what these numbers are and that they're utilizing them in some intelligent way. In reality, I think that's where the accounting profession fails is we need to be doing more interpretive analysis of these numbers to help them understand, well, what are the trends that are going on here? What's the story, the narrative that we're seeing, and does it match what they're experiencing? If the business owner on a day-to-day basis is experiencing one thing in the business, let's say cash flow frustrations, or let's say they're dealing with sales issues or successes for that matter, do the numbers also demonstrate and reveal that? Can I say, hey, you are having and you've experienced, and the two experiences match? And that's what we're looking for.
That brings me to my next point. I think is the point that you made about, accounting is the language of business, and just where one of the things that I realize in traveling to different countries is that kind of the basis of accounting, as probably as you've probably said multiple times, is that accounting is universal. One of the things that I like about just the name of the company that you have is when it comes down to the name of, like I said, universal accounting, what is the first perception that people usually have when you tell them that name or they hear that name?
So I'm going to answer it two ways. One, the name is deliberate. The whole concept of numbers being the universal thing. I mean, just go to the scientific type thing. If we speak with an extraterrestrial type entity, it's probably through math that the communication is going to begin. So that's a whole nother tangent, but it shows the value of the numbers. So universal, it's definitely that. And what we're trying to talk about here is the fact of whether you're in Australia, you're in Great Britain, Canada, United States, at the end of the day, the banking institution still looks at the P&L in a very similar way. There's a balance sheet that whether you're looking at it in, say, Arabic or you're looking at it in Chinese, at the end of the day, the numbers just communicate. Okay, at the end, is there a balance? Is there a profit? That's so huge, and there's so much to be said about that. But the second thing I'd say is that the company name is meant to illustrate the fact that this doesn't have to be as difficult and as hard as sometimes I think we try to make it. There is, I think, some very basic accounting principles that we can use with our clients that, having worked with business owners now for numerous years, business owners, I can say that time and time again in closed rooms in a safe environment, I have had 100% of the business owners confide in me their misunderstanding or lack of understanding of the accounting information and their appreciation for the time, the energy, the effort to help them understand the numbers in the business. So I think we're far too presumptive as accounting professionals to presume that business owners and managers have that same skill set and understanding of the numbers. It's a foreign language to them. And just like any foreign language, when you're traveling in Europe, as you mentioned, Whether you go to France, you go to Spain, I mean, these are different languages. And yes, you might be able to figure out that the stop sign says alto and it means stop. There's still a lot in the language that unless you speak it as a native tongue, you're missing. And that's what we're trying to help communicate as accounting professionals, what the company is trying to communicate to its owner. This is how it talks, is through the accounting.
That is such a good point because, as I mentioned, I was traveling between, the UK and traveling between France. And one of the things that I don't speak French at all. And so one of the things that I recognize is by not understanding French, I'm like, there are probably so many gaps in exchange of information that are happening because most of the time I'm kind of reading like, bodily gestures to try to pick up what someone is saying. But I'm like, what would it be like if I actually had a translator or if I actually understood the language? I probably would be able to get a much better experience of traveling in France. So, I mean, I think that's an amazing point that you brought up.
Yeah. So having been in France as well, I'm going to slaughter it right now and embarrass myself, but I would go around and the first thing I would try to establish with everyone is parlez-vous anglais? I mean, that was it. I mean, do you speak English? Parlez-vous anglais? I don't speak French. That's just, it's nothing I can do. I speak Spanish. And what was the humorous thing is every time someone would speak in French to me, my mind would equate, okay, they're talking in a foreign language, so I can't respond in English. I'll try Spanish. And I'd come back with Spanish, not English, Spanish. And I was like, stop it already. So it is interesting that language is such an important part of how we communicate. And your business is trying to communicate with the owner. And I'm just going to go off on a tangent here because I teach this quite often. I had an experience where basically I had two families in my neighborhood who each had deaf children. Long story short, when they were raising the children, neither of the parents chose to learn sign language. They were trying to basically cause their children to learn or live in a sound world, in a environment where English is spoken, type of a thing. And so they intentionally didn't learn sign language. And I found that fascinating that as parents, they chose not to actually have this common language with this child that was deaf in each household. And they later, I met these families each when the children were young adults, and the children had at this point begun learning sign language and existing in the sign language community and communicating very well and building friendships. And the parents, not knowing sign language, saw that their children were starting to have an experience that they couldn't relate to and lacked the ability to communicate with. Now, these children, they were deaf, they weren't dumb. And what I mean by that is these people still had emotions and expressions, and there was a lot of stress on the relationship because mom and dad could not talk to the children. They chose to later learn sign language, and their relationship just blossomed because finally the child, as a young adult, was now able to communicate with their parent and express feelings, emotions, interests, goals. These things were lacking because communication was so basic. I'm hungry, right? That's it. And so all of a sudden, these parents went to a new level. Well, imagine a business owner like I've experienced where not understanding accounting runs their business and they just kind of have, is there money in the bank? Did I make a profit? Do I owe taxes? They're just asking very basic questions. You expose to them what is a P&L, what's it used for, what's the difference between cash and accrual accounting, what's the balance sheet for, what's its purpose, what's it telling you about the company, how are we year over year, and all these types of things. All of a sudden the business owner starts to realize this is a tool to help me understand the needs of my business, the needs of its cash flow, a cash flow statement. All of a sudden the business owner just has this epiphany and a better relationship with their business, their, in my opinion, their child, if you will. And it's simply because of the fact that they finally started to understand some of that language. Well, imagine being the interpreter. It's like Helen Keller getting an interpreter. Imagine how much the life for Helen Keller changed, where she couldn't see, hear, and you had this person come into her life that was willing to take the time and help communicate what Helen Keller was experiencing with the outside world and vice versa. That role, I think, is very akin to what the accounting profession can be, should be, but isn't.
Wow. I mean, that is such a brilliant analogy, such a brilliant comparison. I mean, because even as you were talking about with Helen Keller, it makes me think about how many people have had a business that has been trying to communicate something to the owner, but since there was no translator, that business just forever underperformed. or that business just continued to feel frustration month after month because they couldn't understand what their business was trying to say. And it's like, man, that is an amazing analogy.
Well, I hope it resonates with your listeners because, if anything, we as an accounting professional we need to up our game.
Mhm. Now, I'm very curious about that because that's something that I've done, tried to do myself is to really start pushing the accounting profession and other accountants, just pushing the envelope a little bit more of like, hey, for years we got very comfortable of just, playing around with the numbers and being in the background, ticking in time. But it's like, how do we move to being communicators of what do these numbers mean, like, for yourself, as you kind of help push that envelope forward and try to help push the profession forward, have you found many that have given pushback, or have you found others that have, like, been along in that same process trying to help push the profession forward as well?
By all means. I mean, there's a lot of successful businesses out there where, as accounting professionals, they've got a great business model. It makes money. They're working with clients. The clients don't know better, so they're happy. And so at the end of the day, it's a business, and honestly, they're doing just fine. And so there's no reason to change what's working. So I respectfully acknowledge the fact that as an accounting profession, we can probably just limp by handing off the bookkeeping, the financial reports, and in that be fine. The client's happy, we're happy, they're compliant, the taxes are being filed in a timely manner. I mean, everybody's happy, right? So why push the envelope? Why rock the boat? Well, it's simply because of the fact that I think as accounting professionals, we can do so much more for our clients and get paid for it. By no means am I suggesting that this be a charity. So the point is when I go into a firm and I'm assessing what they're doing, I explain that I believe that there are three core services that they should consider providing to their clients. And real quickly, I'm going to explain what these are, and we can go wherever we may. But I think there's, first of all, the bookkeeping and accounting. The second happens to be tax planning and preparation. The third is CFO and advisory services. And I want to be abundantly clear. You can actually have a firm that chooses to offer bookkeeping services but not do accounting. You can actually have a firm that chooses to do tax preparation but not tax planning. You can have a firm that says, I don't want to do advisory, but I'll do CFO. Each of those things are basically six services within those three wheelhouses that you can identify. As a firm, you need to deliberately and intentionally say, these are the services we're going to offer and charge for. And that's where we're going to set the expectation of the client. I feel for the people that say they do accounting work, and at the end of the day, all they deliver is bookkeeping. That's sad, because whether there's a disconnect in the pricing, I don't know. But the point is if I'm a firm and you're doing more than the books for me, I expect that you're going to interpret the numbers. You're going to do analysis. You're going to do comparisons. You're going to tell me a story using the information that you provided with the financial reports. The bookkeeping is merely providing the books to where they're complete and accurate and they're done. There's so much more at the accounting level that I think we just don't do. Tax preparation, great money to be made, great service to provide, tax preparation. But so many are choosing to now also offer tax planning services where you get into very in-depth strategies as to how to avoid legally tax liabilities. And that's R&D tax credits, cost segregations. I mean, there's so many fun and exciting things you can do there if you want to get into that type of a deep consultative relationship with your client. CFO and advisory. That's phenomenal to get involved at the CFO level and help your client implement policies and procedures to impact their receivables process, their payables process, cash flow management, their relationship with lenders and creditors. All of these things at the CFO level are a lot of things the business owner doesn't really consider as they're running their business, large or small, big or not. That CFO role has a place in helping address the cash flow needs of the client. Are you providing that service, being that fractional or part-time CFO perhaps? Advisory services. What are you doing with your client to ensure that they're actually building a self-sustaining, living, breathing entity, a business that works autonomous from the business owner, that truly they are investors in that business and not tied to the day-to-day operations? What are you doing to help them build value in the business? These are six distinct services, all of which have a very clear deliverable and have a very clear pricing strategy that you can use to actually ensure that you're making various revenue streams in your organization. So there's your little rant for the moment.
No, I mean, I love the way that you kind of lay that out because, one of the next questions it brings me to is, as you talk to other accountants, do you get the sense that a lot of accountants understand, like, hey, there are six avenues that you can go down. Because when I talk to a lot of, accountants, either they're like, oh, we do bookkeeping or we do tax preparation. I mean, and that's just two of the six that
Mhm.
you mentioned.
Yeah.
Like, do you find that people are aware of, those other four that you mentioned?
They're conceptually aware. I mean, these aren't terms that they've never heard of, but I don't think have sat down to figure out how there's revenue associated with each of those services, how to package them and price them so that each is an independent offering to a potential client that they get to decide from a menu of, I'd like you to do bookkeeping for me and tax preparation. I'd like you to do bookkeeping and accounting, and I'd like you to do the tax preparation. We don't do tax prep. That's fine. I want you to do bookkeeping, accounting, and advisory work for me. These things are packages we get to choose. And I think you were asking this, but I'm definitely going to answer it. When I talk to accounting professionals, one of the things that I notice is sometimes that they struggle on revenue or profit. They're like, I need to be making more money at this, and I need a strategy. And so when we can talk about increasing price point, that's associated with, are you then offering the appropriate value for the price you're charging? And that talks about services. The second is sometimes the model of doing accounting, to make it sexy and appealing and exciting that you want to go to work and be with your clients, that's exciting. And so if I can go to the bookkeeper accountant and say, hey, why don't we do this with your clients, that if you provided them this service, they actually might be interested in paying you more and would appreciate more and value more, and you'll retain them longer. Therefore, the lifetime value of your client will increase dramatically if you chose to provide these additional services at this different rate. All of a sudden they start to see this more as like a business, and they start to treat it like their clients are treating their own companies. They're like, okay, you mean I can just do more than bookkeeping and have a job where I just do bookkeeping, do tax preparation? Yeah, let's have fun with this. Let's put the sexy back into this and get our sexy on, and let's go out there and make business exciting for us. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, this is going to be great. This year I'm going to expand and I'm going to offer this service. Next year, this service. I'm going to go to my clients that I have today and get 10, 15, 25% of them to pay for this additional service that I didn't offer last year, but I'm offering this year. All of that, it's basically business coaching that I do with my clients for them to actually work on their business and take their company to the next level.
Awesome. I mean, I absolutely love all of that. And I think that is something that a lot of accounting professionals and accounting firm owners definitely could benefit from that. So if someone is interested in finding out more about, kind of how you help coach them and how you help them develop that mindset and those strategies, where is a good place for them to look for you online?
So obviously, I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn. That's a great place. But online for a website, definitely want to start with universalaccounting.com. I have some great resources there. Those free resources are truly for the accounting professional to use as they work on their business. And then, just like yourself, I also host a podcast. It's called Building the Premier Accounting Firm. Love to have people check that out if they're listening to podcasts like they are here today.
Absolutely. So with that podcast, so if the person's going in to listen to it, what should be like the core thing? Like, hey, this is what I can expect to get from that podcast.
Thank you. First of all, every week we have guests on the show, and those guests are experts in their own right. And we'll cover topics that range from marketing, selling, pricing. We'll address tech stacks. We'll talk about onboarding clients, retaining clients, offering quality services, mental health. So we'll just talk about things that they need to be aware of as owners as they're trying to build what we refer to as the premier accounting firm. And then that brings me to another thing that might be of interest. We have a school. It's a post-secondary school for accounting professionals to help them offer these services. And it's universalaccountingschool.com. At that site, we can basically share various programs and resources that we provide to help the business owner, as well as train their staff so that they can, in fact, provide these various services that we described as bookkeeping and accounting, tax planning and preparation, CFO and advisory services.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Well, Roger, it's been a pleasure having you. But before we wrap up, one final question that, I love asking every guest. I mean, we've talked about a ton of amazing and very helpful things. So if you were talking to someone, you were saying like, hey, I was on the finance and accounting show. And when you go listen to my episode, hey, here are two major takeaways that I want you to have from that conversation that I had with Terrell. What would be your two major takeaways that you would tell them, like, hey, make sure you hear this in that conversation that I had?
Terrell, excellent question. Two things. First, that we need to do a better job acting as interpreters for the business as we help it communicate with the business owners, taking on that role responsibility of taking the information and putting it into a context that the business owner can find useful and helpful to make more informed business decisions. The second that I would share is that conversation where we were having of how we as accounting professionals need to step up our game and do more for our clients. There's so much more that we can actually do in our firm that's not only of service and value to the client, but literally can be an additional revenue stream for our business model and bring, as I said in the monologue, bring the sexy back.
I love it. I love it. Well, Roger, thank you so much for being an amazing guest on today's show. It's been a pleasure having you.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. Everybody take care and have a great day. And if it's about accounting, it's universal.
Absolutely.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Finance and Accounting Show. If you like what you heard, don't be selfish. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and then share this with a friend, because you know a business owner that could definitely use this insight. So be sure to hit that subscribe button, share it with a friend, and turn on the notification bell so you get all the updates when we release a new episode.